Hi. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining this live session. This is something we do every Sunday by 7 p.m. Parents raising adolescents. And when we talk about adolescents, we're talking about children or individuals between the ages of 10 and 24. So if you're raising a teenager or you're raising a young adult or you're raising a preteen, this is where you need to be at this time of the day. So you're all welcome to this evening webinar. So today we have another interesting topic we're talking about. We're talking about how parents can guide their adolescents in breaking bad habits while starting healthy habits. So let me say that again. Guiding your adolescents in breaking bad habits while starting healthy habits. If you notice that all this series I've been talking about for the past 1 month, it's about guiding. It's not about you forcing. As parents raising adolescents, one of the things you need to know is that you cannot force them to do what you want them to do. Rather, you can guide them, you can influence them to do the right thing based on your relationship with them. So if you're joining for the first time, or if you just stumbled upon this video, my name is Oluwatoyin Ogunkomi. I'm a family psychologist. I work with parents of African descent. I help them in connecting with their adolescent, and I also provide them with tools and resources in raising these children into well-balanced adults. I also work with teenagers and adolescents, young adults, in providing them with mental health tools and resources. I provide sessions on depression, anxiety, and also any other form of mental health challenges. So you're all welcome to today's session. So talking about habits, what do I mean by habits? Habits are those things we do automatically, those behaviors or routines that we do automatically. These are things that we do, it's like it's part of us. We do it unconsciously or subconsciously. Those are behaviors we do subconsciously. And most times these behaviors, we actually do these behaviors in response to either a cue or a trigger. And these behaviors over time become ingrained into us and becomes part of us. There's this saying that goes that a thought becomes an action becomes an habit becomes a character, and a character becomes a behavior. So it's very important that we understand that habits are not just, they are formed over time. And habits are formed over time because of the repetition and reinforcement we get from doing those things. Now, one thing we need to know as parents is that we have positive and negative habits. We have good and bad habits. And all these habits actually influence the way influence our physical health, our mental health, our productivity, and our overall lifestyle. And as parents, one thing we need to know is that children form habits easily. Children below the age of 10, they form habits easily. Why do they form these habits easily? Because they're very malleable, and the fact that they learn by observation. So most of the habits you might be seeing in your children that you don't like, let me say it here, you might be doing those things. It's either they learned them from you, or they learned them from your spouse, or they learned those habits from people living in the house. No, our children don't just pick things they pick things from people they see around them. So any habit you're seeing in your child today that you're complaining about, that you feel is not good, that habit was actually modeled by someone in the home, or someone that they have close contact with, that they see regularly. Like I said, habits are things that we do repeatedly, and it's being reinforced by something. So another thing we need to know about habits is that these habits form the foundation upon which upon which the lives of children are being developed. It influences the academics. I've said that, I've spoken about this earlier, the academics, their relationship, and their personal growth. Another thing we need to know is that the habits your children develop when they're young, before the age of 9, there's a tendency that they take this habit with them into adulthood. And so for parents here that wants to change the habits of children, or you want to do, there are certain habits you want to change in your adolescent or in your child, the thing about it is that there's hope. There is hope. So for the fact that I said that these habits are formed quite early, there's also hope that these habits can be changed. So there's something we call the neuroplasticity of the brain. That is the ability for the brain to form new habits. It's there. And because of this, we can change, we can guide our teenagers or our young adults in changing their behaviors and helping them in building good behaviors or good habits. Now, how are habits formed? So how come bad habits and good habits, how come, what is it that makes an individual to keep doing something until that thing becomes part of him or her, and that thing becomes a habit or a behavior? One of the things we need to know is that habits are practiced over time. Habits like maybe you're biting of your nails. I know there's some habits we've noticed amongst ourselves. Maybe you go into the fridge, into the kitchen, and the first thing is to open the fridge. I don't know. Let's go to the comment section. What are the habits we've noticed over time about ourselves as parents? Let's go to the comment section, please. What are the habits we've noticed over time about ourselves? Let's go to the comment section, please. So one of the things I know I do is when I'm nervous, I tend to bite my nails. That's why I have very short nails, you know. Another habit I see in other people could be maybe they're going through, maybe they wake up in the morning, the first thing they do is to pick their devices. So what habits do you do? What is that habit that you've noticed about yourself that you do every day? Let's go to the comment section, please. What's that habit that you've noticed about yourself? Let's start with ourselves before we even go into the children. What's that habit you've noticed about yourself? I've said mine. I said first, I tend to bite my fingernails whenever I'm nervous. So what about you? What is that habit you've noticed about yourself? Who's typing? Okay, so while I wait for you to type in the comment section, let me continue. So habits are formed over time, and any habits we developed, it's because the way the brain is designed. So there's this chemical in the brain that is called the dopamine. Anytime we engage in an activity that is pleasurable, this chemical is released, and this chemical is also known as feel good hormone. So it makes us feel good. So each time we do that activity, each time we participate in that habit, you know, the brain releases dopamine, and when the brain releases dopamine, it reinforces that action, and we would want to do that action again to feel good. So for example, so let me give an example. For those that wake up in the morning and the first thing they do is to pick up their phones, there is something that the brain does to them. It makes them feel good. Dopamine is released when they're scrolling, you know, each time they scroll, the brain makes them feel good about the action. And that's why every morning it becomes like a routine. They do it every morning. So there's something called the the habit hoop. Habit hoop. Habit hoop is when there's a cue, there's a trigger, there's a craving, or there's an emotional need that is being met. There's the action you do to meet that emotional need, and there's a reward you get from it, and it's like a cycle. You know, it just goes round and round and round. So it's very important that we need to know that the brain recognizes this pattern. The brain recognizes this connection between an action and the satisfaction we derive from it. And that's how habits are formed. The first time we try, and that's why we tend to ask, so for those that do drugs and all that, and you're wondering, why is this person, what is it in this drug that this person is using? It's because the brain chemical that is being released, dopamine, makes the person feel good. So when the person feels good about the action. The person wants to repeat it. And for every time the person is repeating it, the brain is being rewarded, and that action is being reinforced and is being cemented or being, it's like it's as if you're adding cement to that action, right? So that's what happens. Once the brain recognizes that pattern, that there's a connection between action and satisfaction, it just automatically, the person starts behaving like that, or the person starts acting like that. Then one thing we need to understand is that habits, the reason habits are difficult to break is that when this connection is being when this pattern or this connection is being formed in the brain, right? This information is being filed away into the part of the brain that is called basal ganglia. This part of the brain is an unconscious part of the brain. Is an unconscious part of the brain. And because it's an unconscious part of the brain, we just realize that there's certain actions we take or certain behaviors we exhibit that we just do them unconsciously. So let me give you an example. You're driving. For those that drive, do you know that automatically we're used to driving? Once you've learned it, you've learned it consciously. Before you know it, you just realize that you're just always, there's a particular route, you just keep going. You don't even need to think about that route. You just drive to that, maybe to your office. You go to your office every day, and before you know it, automatically you're just always on that route. And it's the same way with habits. Habits are formed like that. There's a trigger, there's a craving, there's the action, and there's the reward you get from that action. And that's how habits are formed. Now, for parents, would say we want to stop certain actions in our children. So I gave an example. Let me share my slide here. I created a slide. Okay, so one says praying every morning when I wake up. Okay, that's an automatic action. Okay, that's good. Thank you so much for typing that, sir. So I'm going to share my slide here. And I want you all to look at this. Let me see. So I typed out something here. Once you see the slides, please let me know. Can you see the slide? If you can see the slide, please let me know.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, thank you so much.
Loop.
Habit loop, yeah. So this is just how habits are formed. There's a trigger, there's the cue, that's the trigger. There's a craving, like an emotional need. And this emotional need is also like a motivation that makes you to go and do that action, the response. And there's a reward you get for doing that action. And the next time, because you've enjoyed that reward, anytime you see that cue, you always want to go through this. So it's like a cycle. Now, I typed something here for children. So we're looking at bad habits in adolescents or bad habits in children that we want to change. So I gave the example of a child that has no daily schedule. The child does not have any schedule. Now, the cue is every time the child comes back from school, there's no activity. And what happens? The child becomes bored. Now, the child is craving excitement. And because the child is craving excitement, what's the next thing the child would do? The child will go to the sitting room, put on the TV or put on his game and start playing. And guess what happens? The child gets rewarded, and the reward is pleasure. So every time the child comes back from school, because the parents have not created a daily schedule for that child, or the parent has not worked with that child to have a daily schedule, every time the child comes back from school, the child eats. The next thing, the child has nothing to do. The next thing, the child puts on the TV. And there was a particular client I had when I started my parenting journey about a few years ago. The parent called me and said, oh, that there's this, the son, they noticed that the child was addicted to pornography, and I was like, oh, how? What happened, So I was like, okay, walk me through the child's routine. Let me understand what happens. And the parent said when the child comes back from school after eating, it's the only child that's at home. There's no other person at home apart from the housekeeper. The child is, and they come back late at night. So the child just picks up his phone and is on pornography till the parents come home. So you can see that there's that lacuna, no activity. And because the child is bored, the child is craving excitement, the child picks up the phone or the TV to watch whatever he wants to watch and gets the reward, the pleasure he or she gets from TV. And that's how the habit loop is formed. So for parents, if you want to break this bad habit, is this loop we're going to look at. And it is using this loop we're going to use to break the bad habit and start forming new habits. Even for you parents, you can actually use this to stop certain habits in, maybe you have certain habits you want to stop and you want to form new habits. So let me just read what I typed here. I said, so we have the cue. The cue is also always this trigger. It could be either a location, it could be a time, it could be the certain smell, or seeing certain people, or certain feeling, or certain emotional state. There's always a cue. Now, the next stage is the craving. What is that desire or that outcome you want to receive? And this desire would motivate you to act. So like what I wrote here, the person wants to quit boredom. The person is seeking excitement. Now, what is the response? This is the behavior you engage in, either the thought or action you get into to get the reward. So even those that are, so this is part of the things I use when I work with people who are addicted either to substances or to certain behaviors. This habit loop, how to break the habit. Now, once the person indulges in that behavior, there's a pleasure that he or she would always get. And because the brain is registering the pleasure, the dopamine is being released, the part of the brain that is storing the information is, so anytime that person feels that trigger or is in contact with that trigger, the person will go through this loop. And that's why it's important for parents to, when you want to break this habit in your child, you need to have discussions with them. I'm going to go into how to break habits. So what else? Excuse me. Okay. So what are the bad habits? When we talk about bad habits basically, they are habits that have negative consequences in terms of person's health, the person's relationship, the person's general quality of life. Our bad habits are those habits that have negative consequences. And as parents, I'm sure there's so many habits we don't want our children to indulge in. So I've listed about 10 bad habits that parents consider as bad. So we have excessive screen time, we have poor time management, we have unhealthy eating habits, poor sleep pattern, engaging in risky behavior, lack of physical exercise, dishonesty or deception, negative peer pressure or peer influence, poor work. That's when I talk about work, maybe house chores or academic ethics, then also poor communication. So it's very important as parents to understand that what might be bad to you might not be bad to another parent. It's relative. Some parents will say, oh, I don't see anything bad in my child sleeping late or something like that, or eating well. Some parents will say, oh, unhealthy eating habit is not unhealthy, or to them they feel like that child needs to eat now. So what might be bad to you might not be bad to another parent. I need us to understand this. So for you, identify what those habits are, what are those behaviors you're seeing in your child that you want to change. So let's just go to maybe write it down somewhere. What are those habits you feel are bad that you need to change in your children? Just write them down, please. Let's write them down, not in the chat box, write them down. Identify the bad habits. Now, how do we change these bad habits? How do you break these bad habits? One of the things we need to know is that bad habits cannot be eliminated. You cannot eliminate bad habits. Rather, you need to replace that bad habit with another habit. That's the good habit, the desirable outcome, the desirable behavior you want to see in your child. One of the things I tell parents is that, see, life abhors vacuum. So if you're telling your child to stop doing something, what is your child going to replace that thing with? And that's why it's very important that as parents, we need to let our children understand, okay, I don't want you to do this behavior. Why don't you want the child to do that behavior? Explain the consequences of this action or the future consequences of that action to the child. Let the child get the buy-in into this. Because most times as parents, you see parents say, I don't want you to play football. I don't want you to do this. I don't want you to do that. I don't want you to dance. But the child does not understand the consequence of his or her action. So it's important as parents, that's why we're in their lives. I said, how do we guide our children in breaking bad habits? So it's our duty to guide them. So let them see the consequences of their actions. So how do we help them to break this bad habit? Like I said, we cannot eliminate bad habits, rather we can replace bad habits. So the first thing parents need to do is to have conversations with their teenagers or their adolescents. Speak with them, highlighting your observation, letting them understand, I've noticed this about you. What do you think about it, right? Then speak to them about the negative effects, speak to them about the patterns you've noticed in them. Then another thing, the next step is you as parents, let your adolescent be consciously aware of his pattern. Let your adolescent identify what are his cues, what are the things that make him to do that, what are his triggers. There's always a trigger. What are his triggers? Then what are the cravings? What are the emotional need that he's trying to meet? Let him be able to identify this. Let her be able to identify this. What is that emotional need? So you have a child that is always around her friends. Why are you always around your friends? Why don't you take time to study and all that? Why must you be around your friend? And the child might say, oh, I feel safe around my friends, or oh, I don't want to be left out, fear of missing out and all that. That emotional need that behavior is satisfying. Let your child identify it. Then the next thing is that, what is the reward? So the reward is also the emotional need, but what is the reward he gets from that behavior? So for example, a parent might say, oh, my child lies. Why does he or she lie? Is it that each time he says the truth, you punish him? And when it comes to habits are formed either due to the reward we get or due to negative consequence that we're trying to avoid. Do you understand? So as parents, have this discussion with your child, help them, let them identify the patterns. What is this pattern that when it comes to this behavior? Now, once you've done that, as parents, make out a list of all the habits you want the child to break. Identify the most threatening of these habits and always focus on one habit at a time. Scientists says, I think to form an habit, you have to do it consistently for 21 days. Then for it to become part of you, you have to do it for 90 days. So focus on one habit at a time. When you focus on one habit at a time, that habit you want to change, what habit are you going to replace it with? What healthy habits are you going to replace it with? There should always be a corresponding habit you want to change, replace it with. So for example, you have a child that eats too much. Why does the child eat too much? Follow that cue. Why do you go and eat food? Or whenever I'm restless or whenever I'm tired, we are tired. Okay, what next do you do? I go straight to the kitchen. Okay, when you get into the kitchen, what happens? I open the fridge, I bring out ice cream, and I get satisfied. And next time I feel tired, I go to the kitchen, open the fridge, bring out ice cream, I get satisfied. How do we break that loop? So whenever you're tired, you go to the kitchen. Instead of picking up ice cream, can you pick up yogurt, healthy yogurt? Can you see how you've changed that habit? So instead of the child picking up ice cream, the child will either pick up healthy yogurt. Another thing you could do, that emotional need. What are the other things? What are other healthy habits the child can form to satisfy that emotional need? And for every time your child performs in terms of this new habit, we need to reward the child. Encourage this new habit by rewarding the child. Rewarding the child could just be words of affirmation. Oh, I can see that you've changed. You now eat more healthy, and which is really nice. Oh, that's so nice. When we acknowledge their effort, they would want to keep, they want to do more. They want to do more. They want to keep doing it because they can see that we've recognized them and we're affirming what they're doing. Then let's the cycle repeat itself. So I created an acronym. It's MIFFER, MIFFER, MIFFER. Here it simply says, make a list of habits you want to break. I think I should just share my slide and not stop sharing. Where is my slide? Share slide, okay. Okay, so I created an acronym. It's called MIFA. So make a list of habits you want to break. Identify the most threatening of these habits. Focus on one habit at a time. Find an alternative or healthier habit to replace the one you want to change. And encourage new habits by rewards. Rewards could be words of affirmation. Reward could be talking, anything. Just encourage the new habit by rewards, and you repeat this cycle. So you can see. So it's very important when we are forming new habits. So so in case we want to form a new habit now, it's not as if we want to replace the old habits. One thing we need to do, we need to identify a cue. We need to establish a routine and ensure a satisfying reward. And one thing we need to know when it comes to forming new habits is that consistency and mindfulness play key in this process. We have to keep doing it. We have to repeat the cycle. We have to, for us to strengthen this loop, we have to keep doing it. So as parents, what are those good habits you want to see in your children? What are the good habits you want to see in your children? So for example, you want your child to pray every morning. You want your child to clean his room or her room every day. What are those good habits you want to see in your children? You want your child to be more time conscious. Create a cue. Create the response, what you want them to do, and let there be a corresponding reward. Each time we do this, we repeat this over and over. Guess what? That habit becomes ingrained in your child. That habit becomes ingrained in your child. So do you have any question? Any question? Any question?
You can go ahead.
Okay. So, like the saying goes, when we sow a seed, you reap an act. When you sow an act, you reap a habit. When you sow a habit, you reap a character. And when you sow a character, you reap a destiny. Having good character, good habits, building good habits is very important on our journey as parents. And like I said when I started, most habits our children have, they're habits they've seen in us, things we've done. So if you want your child to start building good habits, to break bad habits and build good habits, we the parents should search ourselves. What are we doing? Those things we are complaining about our children, are we exhibiting those habits too? Are we exhibiting those habits as parents? If we are not exhibiting them, let's try to identify where they picked the habit from. And when we do that, it becomes easier for us to help them to change. So that habit loop is very important. Please, let's note that. Habit loop is very important. So what are the positive habits we want to see in our children? We want them to be very good with time management. We want them to eat healthy. We want them to exercise, to be physically fit. We want them to be physically fit. We want them to have very good sleep patterns. We want them to be able to communicate effectively. We want to teach them how to make proper decision making, financial literacy. There's so many positive habits we can actually build in our children. But like I said, we first of all have let there be a trigger. Why do you want them to build this habit? We need to get the buy-in of the children. Let them understand the consequence of the action the reward they will get, the consequence of that action is very important. We cannot say we want our children to do things in a certain way without showing them. So even in the for those of us that are Christian here, when God was talking to Abraham about, I'll make you a bear, God painted the glorious outcome that, see, just follow me. This is what these are the things you're going to get. These are the things you're going to gain. And it should be the same with our children. When we want them to build good habits, what are those things we want there? What are the things they're going to get? When it comes to reward? When it comes to reward, what are they going to gain? And some parents will say, oh, so do you mean I should pay my child for doing XYZ? You don't have to pay your child in terms of naira and kobo, but let there be a reward for that action. And if that child is able to do that action consistently for 21 days, consistently for 90 days, you don't need to reward the child to do it again, because it already becomes part of the child. So habits are things we do consistently, things we do repeatedly, and things we get rewarded for. When I started, I spoke about how habits are formed, the way our brain rewards us for doing certain things. And that's the same way our children, when we want them to build certain habits, we should be able to reward them at the end of the day. And when I talk about reward doesn't have to be monetary. It could be words of affirmation. It could be extra TV time. It could be, we should reward them for when we see them doing this good habits. And when they're doing habits that are not good, what are the consequences that you've laid down in the family? What are the consequences for these bad habits that we don't want to see in them? So today is a short session. I want to say thank you. Do we have any question? Any question?
Yeah, thank you very much, Ms. Ogukomi, for this session. My question is, what do you do when these children have made up their mind what to do and not listen to you? For example, you've told them a good habit, you've told them the benefits, and they just say no, that they just want to do things my way. Probably because maybe the environment they are in. In Nigeria, it might be easy to guide and yes, but once these kids leave the shores, you just feel they are independent, and whatever you say, they just want to do their things their own way.
Yeah. Okay, thank you so much for that question. So the first thing I always tell parents, go on your knees and speak to God about it. One thing I know is that the Bible says the hearts of kings, the hearts of princes, they're in the hands of God. The first thing we do as parents is to pray to them, to pray to God about whatever change we want to see in the child. The second thing you can do as a parent is, if there's a way you can find yourself around the child, just show the child the positive of that action. So one of the things we need to know as parents is, if that action is not life-threatening, is that action life-threatening? Is there a negative consequence to that action? If there's no negative action consequence, if that action is not life-threatening, I think the only thing you can do, since the child is not around, is just to pray for the child and to show maybe positive things you want the child to do. Send it as text and speak with the child consistently about that thing. But when we are talking to them about that thing, it should not be as if we are now preaching, or because most times as parents, we tend to criticize a lot. We tend to correct them too much. We tend to preach. So we want them to change. And each time they come around us, the first thing we talk about is that particular thing. That will drive the child away from you. Please, let's note that. So first thing is, go to God in prayers. Second thing is, if you can find a way to go out, get across to the child and speak to the child about that thing in a passive way, not in an aggressive way. Then, if there are things you can send to the child, since the child is not around you, about the positive things you want him or her to do. But if that action is not life-threatening, if that action is not doesn't have a negative consequence, I think you should just leave the child. Over time, with prayers, God will change the child. That's the only answer I have for now.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yes, sir. Is there anybody else that have an answer? Ife, do you have an answer to that question?
I have answer yet too.
No, now I know you speak to parents too now, so you might have an answer different from what I've said.
No,
No,
you have said it. Yes.
Okay. Thank you so much. So is there any other question? Okay, so let's go to the chat room. Just type 2 things you've learned from this session for those that joined early. Lillian, you came a bit late. I guess you watched the replay. 2 things you've learned from this session. Like I said, it's a very short session. It's just, and what I spoke about mostly was the habits loop. If we understand the habits loop, we're able to help our children change bad habits and instill the positive habits in them. Are we typing? Two things you've learned. Let's go to the chat box. 2 things you've learned. Madam Iya. Okay, Sonny wrote habits loop and Maifa. Bad habits can be broken. How do we break them? How do we break the bad habits? There was something I wrote there. I want somebody to type it in the comment section about bad habits, what we can do to bad habits by replacing it with another good habit. Absolutely. So habits cannot be eliminated. Life abhors vacuum. So you cannot tell a child to stop doing something and not replace that action with another action. So for example, you tell a child, I don't want you watching TV in the afternoon when you come back from school. Okay, what do you want the child to do? So you have to let the child know what you want him or her to do. So we replace bad habits. We don't eliminate habits. We replace habits with another habit. Okay, thank you so much, everyone. Have a nice evening. Hopefully next week we'll have another session. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you very much. Good night.
Good night. God bless you. This session.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.
Yes, ma'am. Bye.